Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orrett Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record this rainy Friday morning, the 27th day of October 2017. I trust that everyone had a restful, enjoyable evening. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. Of course, you know For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orrett Connor. My two co-hosts, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McPhail. You're welcome to join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. It is normally that beautiful radio voice of Miss Susan Watson when she's not globe-trotting. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. And with today being Friday, and despite the fact that the Legislative Assembly will convene today as well, it is our pleasure to have in the studio with us this morning the Honorable D. Ezzard Miller, Leader of the Opposition. So I'm going to go around the table and have everyone say their good mornings to our listening and viewing audience. And we'll start with Ms. Theresa Pitcairn. Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Good morning to you, my colleagues, and to the Cayman Islands and those of us living in the diaspora. Like you, I was just really happy to have that nice little Christmas breeze. And you know how nice it is when you get up in the morning and it's just there and it's kind of dark, but you know, it just gives you that comfort knowing that it's going to be a really, really nice day. I don't want to take too much time because I know the Honorable MLA, Mr. Ezzard McLean, is...
Miller.
I keep calling you McLean
every day. I've done it a few times, you know.
Yeah, I keep calling, and I call hardly Mr. Miller. I sent them a text this morning with respect to some things that they sent me to refer to within the show, and I said, but the two are like Laurel and Hardy. But welcome.
Some people will argue that there's a symbiotic relationship.
Welcome to him, Kush and all.
Mr. Miller, good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Good morning, OC. Good morning, Theresa, and good morning, Dr. McPhail. And glad to be here. Morning to the listening public. And we'll see, you know, today is an important day. We're for the first time in our country, we're dealing with a 2-year, but with 2 years of budgeting as opposed to 1 year. So it's going to be interesting. I see the headline in the Compass, again, maintaining that the government is putting education at the infrastructure as a priority. I hope that it has departed from the projections and recommendations of the SPS, which made it number 3, because I strongly believe that education infrastructure is far more important than a cruise ship dock. But it's going to be interesting to see what goes on.
Okay, Dr. McPhail, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. For the Record, and good morning to Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, and good morning to the Honorable Ezzard Miller, the Leader of the Opposition, and good morning to all your listeners in For the Record land, locally and abroad. Yes, it's a great day today. I hope that the fireworks will start sometime next week when they get into the debates, because there's so much that has to be done. I am interested this morning in discussing the National Roads Authority law with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, because I believe that the National Roads Authority is right, that they have the priority over roads and the National Authority law included bridges, and the overpass over the road is a bridge, and that's what they're doing. And the planning authority should have nothing to do with it. It should that plans for bridges over any roads in the Cayman Islands should come from the Roads Authority, from the National Roads Authority, and not from any individual.
Okay, hopefully we'll be able to get to that, because it's certainly very important, because it's something that is current as well.
And I would just like to say off the bat, kudos to the leader of the opposition. I know he has a job to try to implement the Westminster system of government as far as the opposition is concerned, and that's a hard thing to do, because he's the first one has ever done it, even though 180-something years history of democracy in the Cayman Islands since 1831, and no one has done it. And I kudos to you. It's something that as a historian and a follower of the Westminster system of government and the parliamentary system, I really applaud you for trying to whip your group together and to do what the opposition has to do. They have to oppose and have a vision and have an alternative to the government, and that's what you're doing. And I really congratulate you and applaud you for that.
So, Mr. Miller, the LA is going to meet. Well, there's one notification here says at 9:40 a.m. and it appears as if the governor will be inspecting a guard of honor as well. I hope that the inclement weather does not interrupt that. I'm not sure how they would substitute for that if she's unable to.
Mr. McFeel is probably going to blow his cool when I tell him some of the things that are happening today. For instance, here we are, the second meeting of the session, and we're having the official opening of the session.
And tell us what is irregular or unusual.
Well, official opening should happen on the
first?
first meeting, because how you can have a meeting before the session is open, right? But that's not nothing is unusual when it comes to this group that are managing our parliamentary procedure.
That's like going on your honeymoon before you have the wedding.
Yeah, kind of. Right?
Yes.
The other thing that is happening today is that we're going to completely depart from protocol and history and procedure, in that for the first time in any that I am aware of, in any Commonwealth country, and certainly in the UK, the Speaker is on the program as Speaker and Father of the House, and the Speaker is going to give the vote of thanks to the governor for her throne speech. Now, can you imagine the Speaker in Westminster thanking the Queen for her speech, her throne speech? And these things are...
In the UK Parliament, who does it?
It's usually members from the floor, and they're usually, I think Erskine Mayes refers to a selection process, and then it is debated generally at first, and then the debate moves on to specific areas of concern and stuff like that. But it's all laid out, and it's never happened here before, and there's no need for it. Shouldn't be happening now.
It's usually the leader of the government business in the House.
Okay. Now, you speak...
So just for the benefit of the audience, people might say, and I'm playing devil's advocate, well, this is not no big deal.
Okay, it's a big deal.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, when people say that, well, that's just...
Ezzard is just being miserable.
Exactly. Rabble-rouser. And look here again, something simple like that, and he going on first thing in the morning, and I'm just... So how do you respond?
Because the Speaker is supposed to be neutral.
If you look, exactly.
And if you're Speaker, you cannot be Father of the House, because Father of the House means that you are on the floor, and you're a member of the elected member of the House.
Exactly. If you look at the
it's not right. And it's against the protocol, and it's against the role of the Speaker.
Yeah, because there's and both of you are lawyers. You know that there's long established precedent that you shouldn't judge anything for which you're involved in.
That's right.
Right, and you should.
But for me, it's the whole idea of being neutral. But
yeah,
it was
absolutely
important for you to communicate that for a listening audience.
Yeah, and there's no justification for it. There's no rationale under which this can be explained. If we go back to pre the actual division of the Legislative Assembly into a government and an opposition in the way we were seating. If you go back to the 50s and 60s, it was done by the leader of government business,
Yes.
right? Then sometime in the 90s, we had this, or it might have been a little bit earlier, this introduction of the father of the house. And the last couple of years, it was the father of the house who responded to the governor Trone's speech and moved a motion that it be delayed. So what we can happen today now is you'll get, according to the program, is you're going to get the speaker from the chair, right, recording and the thanks to the governor on behalf of the House. Then the Premier is going to have to get up and move a motion that the debate be deferred. When then the Premier should be doing both.
Of course.
It's just proper, you know? And it is little things like this that will continue to erode the authority and the respect of Parliament. And at some point in time, we have to be able to say that, you know, we have to get back to what is right, not what is expedient or not what is asked for because we don't want a row or we don't want an argument. It must be what is right and what is proper.
Yeah, but that reminds me of in the 1940s and during the war, when Churchill had to leave Parliament to command the war from his bunker, where it was under the Westminster, and he appointed Sir Stafford Cripps as leader of the government business in the House. He was the one that opened the House and did all of the thanking for Churchill while Churchill was away. And you know, it's a protocol. It's a convention of the British parliamentary system. The speaker doesn't get involved in what's happening on the floor. The speaker, that's why he sits up there in that chair. He's aloof from the thrust and cut of debate in the House.
Yeah, the speaker has
the director of the orchestra.
Exactly.
But in an effort, again, to try and ensure that, you know, the audience appreciates that we would like to have some balance, can we invite those, you know, the speaker, and if he can't come on, perhaps somebody that's a proxy that can speak to this, because you don't want the perception that, you know, we're here and you're lambasting and so on.
But we're not lambasting. We're not lambasting.
What I prefer that we do that is that we do the research. I prefer that we do the research and see what obtains in other jurisdictions.
Exactly.
Because the same way we've had a speaker call in and talk about the parliamentary prayer breakfast, but I think even in his public utterances, there may be not some limitation, but there may be certain protocols that he would want to attend, and I'm not sure that he may want to come on to the show to discuss something like that. So I think we would do the research instead. Yeah. But we have to go to a commercial break now, so we can rehash this when we return. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning, and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Ezzard Miller, as well as my two co-hosts, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield. Before we went to our commercial break, we were discussing procedures in the Legislative Assembly. And, you know, just for the sake of clarity, again, it is not intended to be a criticism more than to critique.
Oh, no, this is maybe for you, but this is a criticism from Ezzard Miller, what's happening.
Okay.
It's time to start calling a spade in this country.
Right, and we're critiquing it. And
we're critiquing my criticism? That's
no, we're critiquing we're critiquing, you know, what you tell us is going to happen in the Legislative Assembly, and to see whether or not we will do our research. We may not be able to complete it this morning, to see, you know, what the precedents are for it and what obtains in other jurisdictions where the Westminster type of government is in place, what obtains in those jurisdictions.
Yes, I promise you that if you find anything different from what I found in my research and you find a place that it happens, I'll be quite willing to come and apologize to you.
Okay.
But what I was saying to us during the break, it's a form of that nemo judex rule. It's a natural justice rule where you can't, nobody can really judge someone where he or she is party to or involved in or has an interest in such a matter. I think it's that broad discussion as well. But as I was saying, we have to find a way where we distance our emotions. Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah, where we distance our emotions and the feelings that we have for individuals and just look at the situation itself. And I know that's very difficult for us to do in a very small community because, that tends to happen. But for us to move forward, I think that we're going to have to start maturing in that way where we can actually look at the facts dispassionately.
Well, the speaker's chair is so sacred and impartial that under the Westminster system, especially in the United Kingdom, the speaker does not even run for election.
Right.
His constituency is his and is not contested. And that is because they do not want the speaker to be engaged in confrontational politics. Because being confrontational politics means that you have to take one side or the other, or be against one side or the other, and you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be the speaker's like a judge in the Grand Court or the judge in a court of appeal. You cannot be on one side of the defendant or the side of the crown. You have to be completely impartial, and you cannot make any utterances from the chair that say that you favor one side or the other. And the speaker's role is to maintain what the whole parliamentary system of government in the UK is, the foundation of it. The opposition will have its say, but the government will have its way. That's what his role is for. It's not to make utterances and to get involved in the day-to-day confrontation in politics. I say the trust and cut of debate in the House is not supposed to do that at all.
Well, I mean, if you're going to side with the Trump speech, and basically that's what you're doing, is you're giving thanks for it. I'm assuming that I don't normally give thanks to things I don't support or agree with. So there you go. I don't think it's the right thing to do. And the other historical thing that we're doing today is that for the first time in our history, we will be passing a law that governs 2 years of expenditure for the country. So we will only have Finance Committee again now one more time before election, which would be when we're doing the 18-19 budget now, and then we'll do 2021 in probably the same time in 2019.
What are the pros and cons of that, Mr. Miller?
Well, I voted against the amendment to the PMFL law when it was brought, because under international requirements for audit, and speaking now as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, there has to be an annual audit. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they're going to frame in one bill the 2 years, right? And there's no justification for it other than I would say that there'll have to be another year and a half before the people who prepare budgets will have a budget to prepare. I don't see any huge benefit in it. I would much prefer if we had taken capital projects out and did what it used to be when I went to school, which was yesterday, quite a while ago, where you had program budgeting and you had capital projects were costed and they were programmed across a multi-year, if that's when the expenditure was spent. But you know that this expenditure for this year was this amount, the amount had to be coming down the next year, so that you don't expose capital projects to changes in budgetary allocation, particularly when you have change in governments. Mm-hmm. But they have opted to go to a 2-year budget, and I don't see any benefit in it. The only benefit for the government is that they're only going to be questioned by the opposition twice in the life of their 4-year parliament, because we won't get any opportunity again now to ask any questions in Finance Committee. There will be no Finance Committee next year.
Okay, one of our listeners says that is why the speaker should be from outside the Legislative Assembly. As long as there is a speaker who is an elected member, there will always be occasions when their role as an MLA takes precedence for them. And they're saying that personally, as opposed to that personally.
I agree with that. I agree with that because our political system is too small and too congested. That means that it's too personal to have a speaker who's elected from the house inside, and it's better if you bring a speaker from outside, because then from the beginning, from the inception, from the original inception, people will know that the speaker has to be impartial.
Okay, this will be something of interest to all of you.
But it shouldn't matter, because the rules should be the rules, regardless of whether you're a member or not.
We're going to news time in a minute, but I'm going to squeeze one little thing in here, Ms. Susan, first. This will be of interest to all of us, and something that we will discuss on future shows as well. Barnaby Joyce, the Deputy Prime Minister in Australia, along with 4 other members of the Australian Parliament, have been disqualified for citizenship issues again. And of course, we're seeing it rearing its head again in Jamaica as well. We saw it rear its head here in Cayman. We don't believe that it is settled yet, because there are many people who still didn't agree with the decision that was rendered by the Chief Justice. And it
hasn't gone to a higher court.
Take it any further as well. So lots to discuss, may not be on this show, but on other shows as well. Please stay tuned. Don't change that dial. Very important news coming up. And after the news, For the Record, we'll continue. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, the Honorable D. Ezzard Miller, Leader of the Opposition, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve MacPhail. We're discussing lots of things this morning. Before we went to the news, I mentioned the disqualifications of some members of the Australian Parliament. There were 7 cases that were dealt with by the courts, and out of those 7 cases, 5 were deemed to be invalid elections because of invalid nominations because of dual citizenship, and 2 were deemed to be valid. Has lots of ramifications, questions being raised about those who were ministers, decisions that were made when they were ministers, how those decisions are going to be addressed, as well. And then I'm going to switch to New Zealand. And just a week ago, I think it would have been last Friday, 24 days after their general elections, they finally were able to get a coalition government in place. Now, we in Cayman, we complained when it took us
1 week.
1 week.
Yeah.
But of course, Cayman is not New Zealand. And at that point in time, I stressed the fact that we didn't really need to be kept in that state of uncertainty, that the business community didn't need that, investors didn't need that, the people of the Cayman Islands didn't need that the system that we have in place that we should have, there should be more certainty in terms of after an election, what is likely to take place. But it took New Zealand 24 days.
But you can't give certainty.
No, you can't. You can't give certainty. But
unless you're going to operate like a communist state and only have one party.
It works well in Cuba.
Exactly. They didn't have certainty.
Yeah. But my point was that we were lamenting, when it took us about a week, and it's
I would venture to suggest that the same business community that you say shouldn't been held, it shouldn't have to suffer through that uncertainty.
And others, not just a business
that they were the people who were causing the problem.
Well, you would know more about that than I would. But you can. Those are people say, "Give me a book, give me a book, give me a book." So, Mr. Miller, we're going to hand the microphone back over to you, sir.
Well, getting back to the importance of today, as I said earlier, this is going to be the first time that we do a 2 years budget. It's going to be interesting that, we're going to be, they haven't changed any of the rules of the Legislative Assembly. We're still only going to have 2 hours to debate 2 years of budget, right? And I suspect that there will be the continued efforts to truncate, if not curtail, question time in Finance Committee. I must publicly thank the Premier and his government for giving us until Wednesday to study the document, because remember now, they have been working at least the last 5 months as a government to put this budget together. And they're going to present us this morning now with some, problem in the region between 2,000 to 2,500 pages of documentation, which is multiplied because there are going to be 2 years represented in that. So we're going to have to read, although it's contained in, it's about 5,000 pages of documents that I will have to study and take positions on between now and Wednesday, because it is, the tradition is that the leader of the opposition speaks first in response to the government budget. And then our shadow minister, who was Mr. Chris Saunders on finance, will probably follow me.
And you're certain that tradition will be adhered to?
I can give you the guarantee on that. But let's put it this way. But again, it all lies in the hands of the speaker, because although I may rise to get his attention, if somebody else jumps up on the government bench and he sees them first, then they get to speak before me.
Yeah.
When I got elected in 2009, one of the things that always bothers me in the Legislative Assembly is to hear the speaker repeatedly saying, does another member wish to speak? Does another member wish to speak? So I was always prepared. I always came ready to speak on any issue that was before the Parliament for that day. And I recall that I went to Mr. Kurt Tibbetts, who was leader of the opposition at the time, and said to him, I know that the tradition is that the leader of the opposition speaks first in response to any government bill or motion. However, I'm not prepared to sit there and have the speaker call 3, 4, 5 times and nobody gets up. So you and I need to have some kind of understanding that, if you're not going to speak, if you don't want to speak first, then just give me a sign and I'll get up and say what I have to say. And that worked well, So I think that I'm hoping that I will be given the opportunity. However, I'm not too really concerned that the members of the government bench are going to be grabbing at the mic looking at recent history, because I can't recall the last time that ministers actually got up on a budget and defended their budgetary allocations. Most of the times, only 2 people in recent past, it was normally the Minister of Finance who spoke and delivered a budget address, wound it up, and the Premier wound up. There's not a whole lot of where they get up and defend their stuff, because for it to really be a constructive debate, what should happen is that the Minister of Finance and the Premier have laid out their government's position. So I will respond to that. Then it should be somebody in the government bench then that responds to what I have said, right? And remember what I just said, respond to what I have said, not respond to me. 2 different things, right? 2 very important different things. And then a member of mine get up and speak in response to the probably somebody like the Deputy Premier or somebody else, and certainly a minister. And then there's one of us and one of them, so that there's constructive analysis and suggestions of how best to look at the budget. But because we're confined, I think that the government has to be in the UK the first week in December for the annual what do they call it again, joint ministerial conference of the dependent territories, right? I myself is scheduled to go to London on the 3rd to attend the Commonwealth Association of Public Accounts Committees, and there's a 3-day training workshop which myself and Chris Saunders and Miss Barbara Connolly are going to attend to receive the necessary training. And then the Commonwealth Association of Public Accounts Committee meets on the Thursday, and we applied several years ago to be a member of that association, and we look forward to that. So if we don't finish by the end of November, I guess we'll have to adjourn the House and then come back the second week in December, so to speak, because I know that the Premier is going to be there, and I will be there as well. So
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break now, and when we return, the conversation will continue. Please stay tuned to For the Record. Good morning, and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Honorable D. Ezzard Miller, Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield. I want to also remind you, our listening audience, that the proceedings of the Legislative Assembly will be carried live on Radio Cayman right here on 89.9. So there's no need for you to change the dial after we have concluded this show. Just stay right there and you can hear the proceedings live. For those of you who are in your offices and are allowed to a little sneak listen, on your computers or whatever, please do so. This way you don't have to rely on what you hear on the news or what you hear coming from the talk shows in relation to what transpired in the Legislative Assembly. We understand and respect the fact that you may not be able to follow all of it, but as much of it as you can, please take advantage of the opportunity to listen live to your Legislative Assembly and your members of your Legislative Assembly in terms of what they have to say.
I just got a note from someone asking about the status of the port, whether or not there's going to be debate about that, whether or not...
I can assure you that it's going to be debated. It is unfortunate that the opposition have asked verbally since July on 3 occasions for a presentation on the port and to see the plans and to know what the financial arrangements are, etc., and we've asked once in writing in August, and nothing has been forthcoming. I can tell the people of this country that I have had the EIU working on what's happening about the port, and what I intend to do in my speech on Wednesday is to unveil what I have found and invite the Minister of Tourism to correct what I have said that is wrong. And there are things about it that I am very concerned about, and I think the country needs to be concerned about. But this. Everybody talks about how the opposition should be working with the government. But we can only work with the government if we are giving the opportunity to work with them. And my definition of working with a government does not curtail myself to simply saying, yes, sir, how high do you want me to jump?
I mean, this is a conversation that we've had before about the fact that you guys are elected by the electorate, the voters, the fact that you guys have one common goal, which should be doing what is in the best interest of the country. And of course, the best interest of the country is not limited to the economy, but it's also embraces the social aspect, the cultural aspect, and so on. And I tend to think that the level of acrimony that we see in the Legislative Assembly does not lend itself to you guys arriving at decisions where there's a meeting of the minds in a bipartisan manner. And I've spoken to you and Arden about that from time to time. My personal view is always this: to try and find what is in the best interest by having everybody participate. Now, I know the Westminster system does not necessarily lend itself to that kind of conversation, but as I've said on the show before, a good idea is a good idea no matter where it emanates from. And I personally would love to see more discussion, more meaningful discussion, even if they're heated discussions that take us to a place where we find a middle ground that best represents the interest of the economy, folks that come here and make investments, and best represents that of the Caymanian people, or people who live here.
I agree with you entirely, and we're always willing and ready to sit down with the government. But the Westminster system, and in particular our standing orders, provides a ready vehicle for exactly that you want to do. It's called a select committee of the House. Yes. We can set up select committees of the whole House, or we can do what I tried to do with our concerns about the state of health care, and the terrible state that that's in, and how it has deteriorated under the last two Ministers of Health, was to set up a select committee. Most select committees are either committees of the whole House or they're structured proportionately. Right now, the government has 2/3 plus one of the Legislative Assembly. My proposal to look at healthcare was to set up a select committee of the House made up of 6 people, 4 people from the government, chaired by the Minister of Health, and 2 members from the opposition, which would have given the public the opportunity to witness all of the discourse, and for all of the stakeholders, including the public who the healthcare is designed to serve, to come on appointed times at the Legislative Assembly to offer their input and to participate in the discussion. This government, and we haven't had a real select committee functioning in this country since the last one that I'm aware we did was when we did the immigration law in the 90s.
1992.
Right. Because I can tell you that legislation that went through the select committee process turned out to be better legislation than legislation that is drafted within the confines of the government administration building and simply presented to the public as de facto solution to what we have.
We have one caller who has been waiting for a while. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC. Good morning to your guest.
Morning, sir.
This is to the Honorable Mr. Miller.
Uh-huh.
Have you found out anything from me?
No.
Mr. Miller,
But you've been seeing the Public Accounts Committee, right? And you see how but I can tell you this, they're now using your robot, because I am aware of a patient who's very close to me that we used it on Tuesday, and it was a very productive session. So I can attest to the usefulness, the importance, and the opportunity that robot provides. And once again, we will go at it in Finance Committee and want to know why it is not being used more than it does.
yes, I know that, Mr. Miller. I'm aware of that. But why can't the minister who is in charge of health services, he's a minister of health, Ahern is under him, why can't he tell you what is going on? Because she was asked that recently in the conference that they had, and she gave no answers.
Well, the standard reply is that they're working on it.
But does the health the board, Health Services Authority itself, have a say in it? What about chairman of the board?
We've gone beyond that now. I think it is at the place where we need, I think, cabinet approval for the CPT codes to be added to the charge index so that they can charge for it properly.
Okay.
And that's what they keep saying they're working on.
Yeah. Well, caller, on a positive note, I have seen in the news where the scholarships for doctors that the assistance that's been given by the Seafarers Association, that is in effect, that has taken place. So that's one of the positives as well.
Yeah, that's okay. I just gave them a check for $120,000.
Yes.
That is okay. As long as you give them something that they can spend, it's okay. They'll do that. But this is something that the codes was given to Jennifer Ahern from something like April, and this is October. So if they were given to her, why hasn't she gazetted them and published them?
Well, it was unfortunately there was so much stuff going on in the PSC, and the PSC is confined to 2016 accounts, right? But we go into Finance Committee now, and I can promise you that it's going to come up again.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. One other caller has, a listener, has written in and said, "Good morning, Mr. Connor. We are now entering second meeting of the Legislative Assembly since our general elections. Yet, there is still a deafening silence regarding the formation of the district councils. Can Mr. Miller update us on what each opposition member is doing to establish their respective councils in their constituencies. So
Well,
this is limited to the members of the opposition.
Well, I can tell you that mine is up and functioning and running, right? In fact, I got an announcement here to make on their behalf again today. I know that both Mr. McLean is working on getting his established. I know that Mr. Chris Saunders has had some preliminary discussions with people in his constituents about setting it up. I know that both Mr. Anthony and Mr. Alsaku have in fact publicly said at their public meeting and invited people to come forward so that they can get theirs established.
Okay.
We're not waiting on the government to correct the legislation
Excellent.
because we don't believe that's going to happen.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Doc, you have any questions, any observations?
I just would like to ask the Honorable Leader of Opposition his observation about the fiasco of the Planning Authority meeting a few days ago that it was adjourned
Wednesday?
on Wednesday. It was adjourned for another date, and I would like to hear his take on the challenge made by the National Roads Authority, that they're the ones that have the authority to bring applications to the planning board about roads and bridges,
And not individual.
and not some other individual. And as I took time to bring the copy of the Roads Authority law with me this morning, and the law is the Roads Authority Law 2016 revision.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the authority shall be responsible for the administration, management, control, development, and maintenance of public roads and related facilities. And that includes plan, design, construct, develop, maintain, protect, and administer public roads and related road works. And when you look at the definition of roads in the law, it says roads includes the carriageway, waterways, bridges, culverts, and unfoldings on the edge of the road. And when you look at what the DART people have been asking for to cover the parts of the 7 Mile Beach Road, it's a bridge from one side of the road to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And under the Roads Authority law, the Roads Authority have exclusive right to say and to manage and to build and to construct bridges over the roads, not some individual person who wants to do it themselves. And I wonder if you have any idea whether or not your group as an opposition is going to support the Roads Authority in their claim under the law that they are the only ones who can bring these plans for this bridge over the 7 Mile Beach Road.
Absolutely, we support the position taken by the Roads Authority, and I can assure you that our spokesman on roads is the member for East End, Mr. Orrett McLean, and he will be dealing with things like that extensively in his contribution to the budget debate. But there's a couple of things that concerns us about the new one that they're putting up, the new tunnel, in that right now West Bay Road is single lane in either direction. The one that they have, the one that's already in operation, has 2 lanes or 3 lanes going in each direction. So the other day when a truck got stuck in it, you could still maneuver around, right? Mm-hmm. If they're going to put this, and again, short of being told that you can go to the government administration building and demand to look at the plans that were submitted, these kind of things should be submitted, and the media is doing a terrible disservice to the public by not publishing these plans so the public can see what's happening. If right now just driving across the wall on the seaside gives you claustrophobia, can you imagine what's going to be like when they get the wall on the other side and it's single lane? What happens if if somebody car breaks down in that distance? They're going to block up that lane. What about the oncoming traffic? Where is the protection for pedestrians? In addition to that, it's going to obscure or block, or I don't know how you can get through that concrete wall to get to the beach. right? Because there is a prescriptive beach access in that area that is likely to be blocked by this tunnel. And these are the kind of things that we should have public discussion on, right? But again, when you ask questions, nobody will tell you, right? And what we did with the NRA agreement, I believe that if anybody had challenged it in a court of law, would have said that the whole thing was illegal to start with, because I don't really believe that the deputy chairman who signed that agreement had the authority to sign for all the things that was in the agreement. Some of the things that was in the agreement were actually legal, i.e. the waiving of planning fees and all that. We want to change the law in the last administration to allow the minister to waive certain fees. There was no provision whatsoever to waive fees. So this whole DART conglomerate and their takeover, because the other thing that they're creating over that bridge is volumetric parcels, which they can sell, right? Because we had to create special legislation for them to be able to sell air.
Isn't the air belong to the Green?
Not anymore now, because they can actually file and claim what we now call volumetric parcels, right? Which are, I managed to get an amendment which says at least the volumetric parcels should be related to who owns the ground level.
But the ground level is owned by the road.
Well, but this is the problem we're going to have. Okay. But how is the NRA now? How is the government going to get around giving them volumetric parcels about what the government owns? Part of what they're doing is, I understand that they're in the process now of giving DART back the median and all the roads. So he will own the medians between the roads.
Mm-hmm. Have to go to a commercial break now, folks. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Morning. Welcome back to For the Record. We have two callers going straight to the phone lines. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning to Mr. Miller, your guest this morning. I still say Radio Cayman should cut out this 8 o'clock news, because this program is far too important to us out here, the listening public, for that to be interrupted by 8 o'clock news. After all, we just did the 7 o'clock news. But that's my view on that.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
And thank you, O.C. It's a good program, excellent program. Thanks for the information to the doc and from Miss Theresa as well. But anyway, I just heard say Ezzard said he can't get an answer. Gee, you can't get an answer. We have representatives down here in West Bay. We can't even see, much less get an answer. I pray this year would be a little bit different, since we had the one man, one vote. But it looks like my prayer not answered yet. But I'll keep praying, because He's a just God. Anyway, I want to tell you all that, especially O.C. and Dr. McFeel and Theresa, good program, and also doing program, very informative, but that news need to be cut out, that 8 o'clock news. Yes. I got ding on that, like how I'm going to ding that we need a multi-purpose civic center in West Bay, and I can stop with that until the good Lord takes my breath away. Good morning to you all, and Ezzard,
okay,
give
thanks.
it to him.
Thanks for your call.
Give it to him, and good morning to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you as well, ma'am. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That's all your panel and all that thing there.
Mm-hmm.
Monday, I read the call about some following the labor problem in Cayman.
Yes.
And there's some suggestions I would like to get, especially Mr. Miller's opinions and some of them.
Okay.
One of them was the way the companies advertise. You don't look at the papers, all just an email number. right? And you don't know where the company is or how much offering or anything, you know. And not all of us have computers, you know. They should have made to put a phone number and the location of the business, because if someone's on the north side and they're advertising for a job, say, down the Holiday Inn in 7 Mile Beach, it's almost impossible for that person, especially since they have shift work, to come from the north side to Georgetown to Buster West here, and then the 2 miles from Main Road down to the Holiday Inn, you know. And this goes for a lot of jobs around, that the people will not apply simply because they do not know where the business is located.
Well, I can tell you as early as 2004, a proper address in ads for work permit was a requirement of the Immigration Board. I'm not aware that has been changed. Any ad that does not have the standard requirements for a application for work permit should be rejected by the Immigration Board. Which would include, I see them all the time. Some of them don't have salaries. You get employment agencies applying for jobs for people you don't know who they are.
Yeah, all to put it.
But that's a matter of enforcement by the board.
Well, they need to get right on that.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is, if I apply for a job, say as auditor at a hotel, right? If the labor office has my resume on their computer, they have 10 people. They only have a minute to punch in the computer, and they bring up the people that are interested in job as auditor. Right? Another punch in the computer, and they can inform all the people, those 10 people, of a job available, and they must contact the labor office or this number. Right? Another punch is send all the resumes to that hotel or where it is that wants the employee, and they can choose under like 10 Caymanians who they want to hire, make an appointment for them. Now this would eliminate all this thing about nobody applied, and when they get that, they must send back to the labor office why this person was rejected. It only takes a few minutes on the computer to do all this, and when they apply to the immigration for a permit, immigration can have access to all these people who applied, why they were rejected, and it would speed up the process a lot. When immigration can go right away went through the labor office, there was no Caymanians, or they have 2 or 3 Cayman that have no reason.
Most of what you're asking for is currently in place. Now, whether it's being utilized to its maximum capacity is again a matter of enforcement for the board. But all of that is already in place.
Mm-hmm.
We went through all kind of machinations over the last 4 or 5 years about putting all those stuff in place. That's all in place as far as we know.
Okay. Carl, I want to thank you very much for those suggestions as well. I want to read a press release here, and Mr. Miller alluded earlier to the Joint Ministerial Council meeting, and says here that the Cayman Islands delegation led by Premier Honorable Alden McLaughlin will be heading to Miami for a pre-meeting of the Overseas Territories Joint Ministerial Council on the 28th of October. This meeting is specifically for Caribbean British Overseas Territories, giving them the opportunity to discuss the needs of the islands impacted by the recent hurricanes prior to the JMC meeting that will be held at the end of November in London. The goal being to ensure that the needs of those territories impacted by the storms are a key part of the agenda for talks in London. Now, I've read that to segue into this headline article on BVI Platinum News in the British Virgin Islands, and it's headed IMF deal a possibility, the Premier. So the Premier of the British Virgin Islands, the Honourable Dr. Orlando Smith, has hinted that the BVI has not ruled out a deal with lending agency International Monetary Fund as the country pulls on international support to rebuild following the impact of Hurricane Irma. I have two observations. Number one, most countries, especially developing countries, and I wouldn't even restrict it to countries with huge populations of color, because we saw Greece had issues with lending agencies, the International Monetary Fund. But any country that has had dealings with the International Monetary Fund, it has not been a good experience for them. The strings that they attach to their lending agreements, usually, reducing the size of the public service, devaluation of currency, all sorts of things, not a good thing. My other observation is we are, I'm going to use Mr. Mika Hurlston's terminology now, we are a colony of the UK. Mm-hmm. The British Virgin Islands are a colony of the UK. They talk about contingent liability. Mm-hmm. What about contingent responsibility?
Well,
should the BVI really have to go to the International Monetary Fund to seek funding when it is part of the government, UK's government's responsibility? They are the administering power. They are our colonial masters.
They own the plantation.
Yes.
Well, it goes right. Why do you fix your house before you fix the maid house? Right? You own the house that the maid living in, but you got yours air conditioned, but ours not air conditioned. But I find it not concerning is not the right word, but unusual that a British Crown colony is going to be allowed access to international lending agencies such as the Monetary Fund. I would hazard a guess, subject to correction, that if they went down that route, it would only be possible with the British government. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that has always happened, I can go back to the 90s when I was trying to build a Dr. Horta hospital, and I approached the UK government to borrow money to build a hospital. They were quite happy to give money to countries for which they had no constitutional responsibility, right? With no opportunity to monitor the use of the money as they would have in this case in the BVI. I mean, if they provided the funds, they have the constitutional authority to monitor the implementation, to stop in the kind of corruption that is very far too common when it comes into these lending agencies and who gets a piece of it and who administers it and everything else. I mean, so, but for some reason, the UK government has always been happier to put huge capitals into these international lending agencies. And I understand from what I see in the media is that the problem BVI, Turks Island, and Anguilla has is that they can't access the European fund because their standing of living is too high. Mm-hmm. And they're not considered to be poor countries. But if you're completely devastated, you're pretty poor, right? And don't forget what you had the week before, yes. Right? But I certainly support the Premier advocating that these people be treated properly by the United Kingdom government, and we probably Cayman and Bermuda is in a better position to advocate for them because we're not grant aided. Mm-hmm. And I would certainly support that we advocate that they be treated properly. But in saying that, my advocacy would be that the UK must provide the funding.
Yeah, exactly.
Or they must, even if they have to go back and take some back from the European Union and give it to these people.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. Before I hand the mic over to Ms. Theresa Pitcairn, one of our listeners has said, you mentioned earlier that the LA broadcast will be on 89.9, but as broadcasts have been on 105.3 FM previously, so could you clarify if today it will be on 89.9, but going forward to be on 105.3 as well? Ms. Susan, can they listen? 89.9 only. The live broadcast will be on 89.9. And then, of course, we have the replay, which is on 89.9 as well.
You sure that the direct live broadcast is not on 103?
No, Ms. Susan confirms that it's 89.9.
Because sometimes they do that. They broadcast it on the Breeze
105.
Right, and then the rebroadcast at night is always on 8 or 9.
Yeah, which I got a little peeve as well. When we're listening to on to the LA live on 105.3, and they take the break, we're going to be back at 2:00, and I turn back on at 2:00, and I'm listening. I'm hearing nothing but music going, and if I'm lucky, they may come back on at 3. If I'm lucky. They have to keep their promises to the listening audience.
No, but you will notice that every time the government moves the suspension of standing order, I don't know, 10 something to not adjourn the House at 4:30, I vote no. Mm-hmm. I only vote no when we did exactly that. In a day that we start at 10 o'clock, if we break at 12:30 for lunch and we say we're coming back at 1:30 or 2 o'clock, we come back at 2 o'clock, right? And we don't take a break again, I don't vote against it. But I am not going to support holding members there after 4:30 when we waste so much time during the day. We don't start some days till 12 o'clock. We break for lunch because we all get hungry. We all got a little maritime something about us that eat at 12 o'clock, right, Dr. McFeel, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Then we don't come, we say we come back 2 o'clock. We don't come back till 3, 4 o'clock. Then 4:30 we worry about to stay there till whatever time of the night. Mm-hmm. Now, we have agreed, and we were with the Premier, that we will work till 9 o'clock each night because of the demands of the government for international stuff at the end of the month to try and complete it. But I made it clear, mm-hmm. I don't have a problem working till 9 o'clock at night, but I want us to start at 10, and I would prefer to see Finance Committee start at 9, right, and we work properly. But if we take an hour for lunch, it's an hour for lunch. It's not, and the reason why that happens, is because the government is having meetings in all kind of rooms. That's why they can't get a quorum in the House, mm-hmm. which again, the standing orders say you're not supposed to be conducting any meetings there like that unless you have permission to speak up.
Okay.
Right? But we need to concentrate on the business of the House. Mm-hmm. Let's get busy. Let's work diligently, and let's get it done.
Okay. Ms. Theresa, I'm going to ask you to hold off on your question because we have 2 callers, and we know that Mr. Miller has to leave at 9:15 because he has to inspect the Guard of Honor. As well. Just a joke. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Morning, yeah, right across the board. I want to say to my good friend, Mr. Steve McPhail, Dr. Steve McPhail, to me, he come in like what they call China, the sleeping dragon. While he's not sleeping, the gentleman is right on top of everything at the precise moment. I am so glad that he brought up this morning that issue about the bridges.
Yes.
Quickly, the other day I seen some traffic was shut down under the bridge that is completed now because of the roundabout. I understood up ahead the Galleria roundabout was called. And I know there was some people in one car that they looked like they were getting claustrophobic or something, inhaling those fumes because there was no way to go. And they were so upset. What I'm saying now, the other one on the West Bay Road that they even want to extend 200 feet more. Imagine that traffic light by Rubis gas station goes unread, and the traffic is stuck into that tunnel. Okay? I mean, these things should never have been allowed to happen. One bridge is too much. 2 is, what shall I say? But I am so happy that Dr. Steve brought that up because I am concerned that, what the Israelis talk about, about taking tourism and destroying tourism. Well, I have reason to believe that's what's happening. And I hope that the authorities that be planning, the director planning, look into this and consider with that traffic light up ahead and you stuck into that tunnel, what can happen? Exhaust fumes coming in, carbon monoxide and all kind of stuff that you're going to be inhaling. So That's my concern, and thank you so much, gentlemen, for listening to me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. What the caller is really saying there, have we had an environmental impact study in relation to that, and what it will do to the quality of the air in that area?
Yeah,
But we want to environmental impact because some people in Northside want to build some farm roads on farmland.
Yes.
That's a huge contradiction, and we shouldn't build farm roads on farmland. But the question, going back to what Dr. McPhee raised earlier in terms of the statutory authority of the NRA, it would be very interesting to see if the Attorney General, on behalf of the NRA now, will take up how the planning department granted the permission in the first instance.
Exactly, because
that should be null and void.
Exactly.
Okay, we have one more call.
Tested in court.
One more caller. Let's grab the caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, ma'am.
And good morning to your two hosts and to the Honorable Ezzard Miller.
Good morning,
Mr.
ma'am.
Miller, I just want to ask two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Two questions. How is your dad?
He is progressing.
Thank God for that.
Thank God too, yes.
And always give my love to your mother. I've known her for many years.
Will do.
And just one statement I am going to make. It frightens me to think. Just suppose we had an earthquake. Can anybody figure out what would happen about that? I think this is a terrible situation that exists now, and according to the plans, it's only going to get worse. Oh, please, I beg you, Mr. Miller, you and many more in the House, think carefully, because it's the future. I'm only an old woman now. I won't be here much longer, probably, I don't know. But think of future generations that are coming up. Think of them. And I thank you most kindly, Mr. O.C. God bless you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miss Georgette. Mr. Miller?
Well, I'm getting back to the new tunnel on West Bay Beach Road. Again, it would be interesting to see if we tested the authority here and whether the permission that was granted by the CPA was in fact, they didn't have the authority to do it because the application didn't come from the NRA, and whether the NRA was consulted to the level of consultation. But it's not a matter of consultation. It's a matter that the application should have been made by the NRA and not by the DART conglomerate.
Yeah, because the NRA is the only one who has authority to build bridges over their roadway, and not some property in the individual who own the property on the side of the roadway. It's the NRA law forbids that from happening, and it seems to me that not only that this proposed bridge over the West Bay Road is illegal because it has not been done by the NRA. There no application came to the planning from the NRA, and the first one also would fall under the same law that it was built illegally without the authority for the NRA. And I don't think the authority. I don't think it came within the. I don't think it came within with the NRA agreement.
And at some point in time, we have to stop referring back to this magical NRA agreement that covers all sins, because again, not being a lawyer, but I can understand how a single agreement, right, can simply remove any statutory authority from any other law that exists in the country having an impact on that agreement.
Yes. Yeah.
But everybody seems to be quite happy to say, "Oh, well, that's what was negotiated."
Okay.
But it has to have statutory authority.
Who would negotiate that success? And I don't understand. I really don't, you got me at a loss.
But this is what, every time we raise something concerning what's going on 7 Mile Beach with the DART area and the roads and the volumetric parcels of air and all this sorts of stuff, the defense of the government is that that's what was in agreement. Who negotiated agreement? The government negotiated with DART.
Talking about bridges, well, we've heard there's a movie called A Bridge Too Far.
Yes.
And there's a song called Bridge Over Troubled Waters.
Yes.
And of course, in the political
Garfunkel.
elections in the U.S., in Alaska, there was a bridge to nowhere.
Bridge to nowhere.
So what are we going to call this one? Let's go. Folks, I'll give you our audience. We'll have a competition on this one. A new name for the dark bridge.
The Caymanian Elimination Bridge.
The Cayman Elimination Bridge. A bridge to the future, yes.
Mr. Miller, we know that you're going to leave now, so I want to give you some
thank you for having me.
Comments.
And the next couple of weeks should be interesting. I encourage the public to listen because, again, I want the public to understand that we're not just dealing with 2018 in this budget. There's going to be no opportunity to influence this publicly for 2 years. The government has certain caveats under the PMFL law that they can move money around and they can increase expenditure. I think it's 10% of the total amount, right? Now, 10% of the, again, it's going to be interesting to see whether that 10% is going to apply to the annual allotment or to the total allotment in 2 years. Because 10% of, what we're talking, somewhere of 800 plus million is one thing. 10% of 1,600 million or 1.6 billion is a whole different ball game. And I'm not sure that all of these mechanics were worked out before they went to this 2 year budget. I had never understood the rationale or the justification for making that change to the PMFL law, but it's there and we have to deal with it. And I can assure the public that the members of the opposition are going to do our due diligence. We will be seeking to get education made the number one priority. That is because it has the most money allocated for it in capital. It has the most money allocated to it for its consumable side of the recurrent expenditure. Because we found in our tour of the education institutions two things that really bother us: a lack of resources, human resources, that is teachers, and the lack of resources in relation to consumable items that the teachers need to teach with. And, you know, when I was a boy growing up in Northside, the only person that was more important in the district than the teacher was the preacher, right? And we had the teachers on high platforms. The teacher saw my mother at the little shopping store. She saw him at church. She saw him at any social event in the constituency. We took all of that recognition and respect away from the teachers, but we haven't given them salary to compensate for it. And we need to find a way to, and I know that we was quite clearly demonstrated to us that salary is not all, but we have to find a way, and we have to be deliberate in attracting Caymanian teachers to our teacher profession and finding managerial ways to manage them and want them to keep their enthusiasm and stay in the system.
But wasn't there a declaration a few months ago that about teacher salaries and increase, that they were going to seek to pay teachers better salaries? I recall that.
Well, there was an announcement of a hope, but that announcement does not appear to have carried with it cabinet authority.
Okay.
And we will be looking specifically for that increase in this coming budget for emoluments for teachers.
Okay, Mr. Miller, all the best, and we will certainly listen to the debates in the Legislative Assembly. Folks, you please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're running out of time, so we're going to make this call, or the last call for the morning. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to the Three Musketeers.
Morning, sir.
I presume Mr. Miller has left, honorable leader. And I'd just like to say with regards to the bridge thing, I'm surprised that none of you mentioned that famous movie that won an Oscar from Sir Alec Guinness, Bridge Over the River Kwai.
Yes.
Because one of the prisoners, who is the very few alive, I guess, who were building that, the British prisoners, is Governor Long, and he's right there in our Pines home, and he often would sit and talk to me about that when he was able to. He was a prisoner of war there for 2 years, building that famous bridge. Colonel Bogie was the British engineer who was a prisoner too in charge. Then it became Colonel Bogie, I don't remember his real name. Anyway, what I'm saying with regards to the bridge thing, as you all clearly stated, you know a lot more than I do. It's the NRA is supposed to doing that. But that is built. The tunnels are built now and all that. But they do have exhaust fans, huge exhaust fans, I noticed. And I've seen that with all the big tunnels in the United States. One here in New York, I think, and Washington too. They have huge exhaust fans. Traffic can be backed up there. They have your cleaners and stuff like that. I presume the IRS, the NRA would have been, my mind was on the IRS, the NRA would have been involved in clearing those things that they're capable of clearing the exhaust if the traffic is stuck for so many minutes and so forth. Presume someday, and I presume the new one they're building would have the same thing if they're allowed to build it. I don't know. It's this state of the game where we have decided that we want to bring in investors, and we're opening our gates to everything like that. We're going to be tied up in court when they bring lawsuits against us for buying the land for millions of dollars and not able to use it or whatever. I don't know what's going to happen. It's a very different game, man. So I don't know how it will work out. I just wonder what is the attention being paid to the spot lock, because that has to be utilized at the time when we have our highest cruise ship and tourism business during the month.
Yep. Okay, caller, thank you very much. We'll ask you to leave us there because we're running out of time, and we still have one point that Miss Theresa, we have delayed on. Hope you haven't forgotten what it is. I know you haven't. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Go right ahead, Miss T.
No. So we were talking during the break about this dichotomy or contradiction in that on the one hand, dependent territories pretty much don't want the United Kingdom being necessarily involved in the political process and so on. And they want to have that level of independence. And then on the other hand, when there is an issue with economic requirements, they're saying they're going to go hand in, and they ask about this money, and they want the British to recognize and act on its contingent liability responsibilities. So I always wonder, because we in the Cayman Islands tend to think that our prosperity is dependent on our dependent status. And I have always disagreed with that. I don't know who created that boogeyman story, because it's just, look at the evidence, it's just not true. Yep. And we continue to perpetuate this view that is the case. But
there's no empirical evidence to support it.
But I have been told by the framers of our offshore industry, certainly when I started out as a lawyer, I was told time and time again by two of those who played a significant role in the way in which the offshore industry evolved, is that you guys need to go independent. And I know people don't want to hear that. But you have to be in a position where you can always make your own decisions, whether political or otherwise, because this boogeyman about our success is dependent on our dependency status is just so wrong. In fact, Cayman has done well in spite of being a dependent territory. So I have this issue because it's a Caymanian dilemma. I mean, we now talk about the issues that we have with immigration and how that is preventing Caymanians from doing very well. We need to kind of push these things back and start to really have that conversation about what we really want and how we're going to move forward. Because when you're locked in that mental state where you believe that you're less than, that can't be good for your kids and your family and the community.
What we'd like to do is we'd like to continue the conversation, that conversation along those lines, because there's a lot to talk about in terms of the UK's obligation under the United Nations in relation to her. And there's some people say when you take the cow, you got to take the calf. That goes along with it as well. So at the same time, where the UK should be preparing us to take on, to be in charge of our own destiny.
Look at the language.
At the same time.
At the language that you're using. The UK should be preparing us.
Yeah, there's an obligation. There's an obligation, international obligation, to ensure that the climate, that the conditions are right for us to be the framers of our own destiny. Yeah.
But let's segue that into what Dr. McField is always talking about with the whole the things that we're supposed to.
We have to do our part too. We have
to
do our part too. But we're running out of time. I want to give Dr. McField a chance as well to say something, because we need to break exactly at 9 o'clock, because there has to be preparation for the LA as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. For the record. I would just like to remind all our listeners in For the Record land that we have the Constitution, which is the highest law of the land. And despite its anomalies and things that they have left out, there is something in the Constitution that says lawful administrative actions. And let me just read what it says. It says, Section 19 says, all decisions and acts of public officials must be lawful, rational, proportionate, and procedural fair. And every person whose interest has been adversely affected by such a decision or act has the right to request and be given written reason for that decision or act. We have an indefeasible right to use our beaches and to have access to them. And when it comes to building bridges over roadways, that decisions are made by public officials. And every Caymanian, it doesn't matter where he lives, in East End or North Side or West Bay or Cayman Brac or where, has the right to ask our officials to give reason for the decisions that they're making. And so this new bridge that they are building now, we would like to know how the planning authority has the right to decide whether this bridge is built over the road or not. Under the law as it exists now, that authority comes from the Roads Authority. No individual landowner has the right to build a bridge over the road just to connect his land that he owns on the other side of the road. As far as bridges are concerned, it seems to me that when I looked at the procedure for building bridges, it's usually for a profit. It's usually to take care of some traffic procedure, not primarily to connect landowners' land from one side of the road to the other,
the value of
or enhance the value of some landowners' land. And I would just like to remind the Caymanian people that the Constitution says that they have a right to know, and they have a right to be involved in the decision making.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, folks. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension For the Record, into your homes, into your places, into your vehicles, as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want or those who crave. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to listen to your radio station, Radio Cayman. Continue to listen on 89.9 FM this morning for the proceedings in our Legislative Assembly. Very important to you. You want to hear what's going on there. Have a great day. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.